Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. So Vayeshev, the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says, V'yasev Yaakov b'shalviso ba'aro toisovus avoy ba'aro de Canaan. In other words, that Yaakov sat with shalva, with tranquility, with shalvisa, in the land that his father lived on a level of megurei aviv only, meaning megurim is like ger anoichi ba'aretz, which means a sojourner, a temporary resident, whereas that's megurei aviv, but Yaakov is Vayeshev. Yaakov is V'yasev Yaakov b'shalvesa. But it's kind of strange because was Yaakov's life more tranquil, more comfortable, more settled, more permanent than Yitzchak's? To the contrary. I mean, Yaakov, all his life was complicated with ups and downs. I mean, Yaakov, his even before he was born, Vayisroitzitzu Habonim Bekirba, and then the arguments with Esav about the Bechora and about the Bracha, and everything that went on with Arami Oivedavi, he sat by Lavan, and the story with Shem until Mechiras Yosef. I mean, his life seems to be much less tranquil than his father's. And why does the pasuk say Vayeshev Yaakov that he was Bishalvesa? The Rebbe says there's a pasuk in Eov, Lo sholavti v'lo shokatati vayovoi roigez. And Chazal darshan this pasuk in this week's parsha in the Midrash Rabbah to be talking about Yaakov Avinu. Lo sholavti. In other words, I wasn't calm. The Chazal say Lo sholavti me Esav, v'lo shokatati mi Lavan. Vayovoi roigez bo alai rugzoi shel Yosef. No, it's the Chavada Apella that Chazal say, that the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says that Vayeshev Yaakov is V'yasev Yaakov b'shalvisa. You know, by Moshe Rabbeinu it says in Parshas Shemois, Vayeshev. It also says Vayeshev. It says Vayishma Moshe es hadover hazeh Vayevakesh Vayishma Paro es hadover hazeh Vayevakesh la roiges Moshe Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paroi Vayeshev be'eretz Midyon. Says Rashi Vayeshev be'eretz Midyon nisakev shom k'moi Vayeshev Yaakov. Rashi is trying to say, don't think that Vayeshev means that he settled there. Don't think that he led a comfortable life there. He's escaping from Paroi. But sometimes yeshiva is a lashon akava, a lashon of just a temporary stay. It doesn't mean that he settled there. Vayeshev Moshe be'eretz Midyon, and Rashi brings as an example the Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Megurei Aviv. That this Vayeshev Taka doesn't mean that it was a yeshiva of any permanence or any calmness and or any comfort. So how did the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel teach Vayeshev Yaakov in the sense of V'yasev Yaakov b'shalvisa? So you know, it could be that this is really the basis of what Rashi says. Rashi says, V'oid nidrash boy, Vayeshev Yaakov bikesh, Yaakov leishev b'shalva, kofatz olav rugzoi shel Yosef, Oma HaKadosh Baruch Hu tzadikim, loy dayon, Mashe mesukin lohem lo'olam haba elo shemevakshim leishev b'shalva ba'olam hazeh. So in other words, this drasha keeps the meaning of Vayeshev in the sense of shalva, but teaches the pasuk not that Vayeshev isn't what actually happened. Vayeshev is what Yaakov hoped for, what Yaakov wanted. He wanted a yeshiva b'shalva. It didn't materialize. It didn't happen. So the Vayeshev is V'yasev Yaakov b'shalvisa, but it's not describing the actual reality, but it's describing what he wanted, and what happened actually was the opposite. Now, we know that Yaakov's entire life, as we said, Yaakov's entire life was unpeaceful and not calm and not comfortable. And now, as an old man, Bikish Yaakov Vayeshev b'shalva. Versteht sich allein that Yaakov, who's the Bechir Sheba Ovois, and about the Ovois we say Ha'ovois Hein HaMirkova. They are the Mirkova of the Roichev Shomayim Be'ezrecha. So Avada, the Bikush Leishev B'shalva wasn't for his own comfort. It wasn't for his own needs. It was only in order to enable him to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom on a higher level. So what's so terrible about Bikesh Yaakov Leishev B'shalva? That Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzadikim, Loidayon, Mashe Mesukin Lehem Lo'elam Haba, Elishimavakshim Leishev B'shalva Ba'elam Hazeh, and therefore Kofetz Olav Rugzei Shel Yosef. No, Avada, we're not here to say anything about the others, but whatever Chazal tell us, the drosha v'oy dorshu Rabbi Seinu, a drosha is miloshin drisha. It's really asking of ourselves. It's what we should be demanding of ourselves. So what we could glean from this Chazal is, the Mishnah says in Avos Perik Beis, Batel ritzoincha mipnei ritzoina. One should nullify his will before the will of the Rebbeinu Shalom. No, we know the Gemara says in Bava Kama Daf Lamed that Masechtes Avos is mili de chasidusa. So obviously, we're not talking over here about nullifying wills that are anti-Torah. We're talking about, because if that's what we're talking about, it wouldn't be a mili de chasidusa. Every Jew is mechuyev to be mevatel his negative ritzoinus before the rotzen of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what do we mean when we say batel ritzoin chamipnei ritzoin? But that the Gemara says in Brachas Daf Lamed Hey that the parsha of Ahoya im Shomoya Tishmu is be'ein oisin ritzoinoi shel makom. No, so Taisus asks, how could we say that the parsha is a be'ein oisin ritzoinoi shel makom? The parsha says, "V'hoya im shemoya tishmu el kol mitzvosei asher anechi mitzav eschem hayoim." So how is this ein oisin ritzoinoi shel makom? So Taisus says, "V'yashloim et demayri vadai she'oisin ritzoinoi, aval ein oisin ritzoinoi kol kach the einam tzadikim gemurim." So what does that mean? It could be that oisin ritzoinoi shel makom means that in my asiyah, in my doing, there's only ritzoinoi shel makom. I become a vehicle, I become a vessel for ritzoinoi shel makom, and there's no self-interest involved at all. It's not that I want to do his will, but his will dominates my doing. That's the oisin ritzoinoi shel makom, that in my asiyah there's only ritzoinoi shel makom and nothing else. And Memela, the parsha of Ahoya im Shomoya, which is talking about schar v'oinish, is ein oisin ritzoinoi shel makom, because I still need to push myself and convince myself in to do the right thing. But the Ritzoinoi Shel Makom isn't the only thing in my life, and therefore it's ein oisin Ritzoinoi Shel Makom. So when the Mishnah says, as a mili de chasidusa, the Mishnah says batel ritzoincha mipnei ritzoinoi, it means that a person should nullify his self-interest completely. And he should only the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be present in his asiyah. The next Mishnah in Avos actually says, Al toimar likesheipone eshne shema loitipone. Don't say that when you'll be free of all your tirdas, then you'll learn, because maybe it's not going to happen. They say that the Kotzker Rebbe said, Efshe bistu aloisi ponenik. Maybe you are somebody that will always be leading a life, and your mission is to be loisi ponen. Meaning that sometimes people are waiting for the right opportunity, that they should have the peace of mind, they should be able to learn properly, but that might not be your mission. Some people, their mission is dafka to be to lead an unsettled life, to lead a life where there are many disturbances and many things on your mind, and you can't allocate enough time and enough mind to learning on a higher level. But what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from you is that bit that you can do in these circumstances. You are maybe a loisi ponanik, and you're waiting for the likishi pona eshne. That's not your mission. Don't postpone your aliyah and wait for that moment, because that moment might not come, and that's not really what you're here for. And that's the batel ritzoincha mipnei ritzoinoi, that even the positive ratzon that one has to achieve shleimus, perfection in Torah and mitzvahs, the wanting to have an eshne that is only possible in a matzav of tipone, that ratzon you have to be mevatel. And you have to recognize that loy mekoymoi shel ha'adam mechabdoi, elo ha'adam mechabed es mekoymoi. The circumstances just create the arena for your bechira, and the circumstances might not change. This is where your mission is at in this particular matzav that you're in right now. The Sefer Atanya in Perek Chav Zayin, he's marich in this Indian. He says people that have negative thoughts and it depresses them because they feel that they're not in the right place in Avodas Hashem. He says that Adarabah, they should be happy because every time a person pushes away a negative thought, he's mekayim a mitzvah. And it's Yoshav v'loy Ovar Aveira, Noisnim Loischar Kilu was a mitzvah, and they should be. And he says that the fact that it brings him down is because he's a Baal Gaiva, and he thinks he's on a Madrega of a tzaddik, which and therefore why are such thoughts coming to him? He says if he would recognize his place, he would accept it, and he would understand that the nachas ruach that he brings to the Rebbeinu Shalom is by being doiche the machshavas. And he says, Ushnei minei nachas ruach lefonav l'maylo. One is from the bittul hasitra achra legamri, ve'ishapcha meriru lemiska, u'mechashoicha lenahora. And that's the avodas tzadikim. And then there's the avodah of the beinanim, who never actually overcome their evil inclination. And it's always a struggle. And every time that they overcome their evil inclination, that brings the Rebbeinu Shalom and Nachas Ruach, and he brings a Zohar that says, V'asei li matamim, that Yitzchak said to Yaakov, it's really a mimer of the Shechina to Klal Yisrael, to Knesset Yisrael. And there's two types of matamim. There's matamim that are macholim, arevim, umesukim, and there are matamim of charifim, v'chamutzim, rak shehem tubolim, umesukonim heitev. And that's the avodah of tzaddikim and the avodah of beinanim. In any case, there's the avodah of tipana and there's the avodah of loisipana. And some people, their mission is to be oivid and an oivid of loisipana, and they'll never get to the likishe ipana eshne. And if they're always waiting for that, it's like, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Daf Kuvav, da Amri Inchi, Gamla, Ozel, Lemi Boya like Karne, Udni da have like Zizon Mine, that Gomel that wants to have horns, he loses his ears. In other words, the horns he'll never have. But what he loses is his ears, because he loses his appreciation for what he does have, and he doesn't use the kalim that he does have. And the Mela is somebody that's waiting for the likshi pona eshne, he loses everything. And it says, Vayar Elokim es kol asher osa v'hine toiv ma'oid. So there's the Bavusta Medrash that says that toiv ze hachayim, ma'oid ze hamavis. So based on what we're talking, we can say al derech hatzachos, that somebody that's content with his lot in life, and so the toiv is enough for him. And Masha'enkein, somebody that's always going for the ma'oid, somebody that seeks perfection, that's movis. You can't live that way. If you can't settle for less than everything, I mean, you have no life. And that's true in Mili the Alma and in Mili the Shmaya. Somebody that's not willing to settle for less than the Lakshi Pane Eshne, he doesn't have anything. And he loses the Kihem Chayenu, Va'orech Yomeinu, which means that a person should have a connection regardless of his situation. And that's also what they say over there in the Medrash, that Toiv is Yetzah Toiv, and Toiv Ma'oid is Yetzah Hara, because it's the Yetzah Hara who convinces us to want the Ma'oid. And when you want to go for the Ma'oid, you lose it all. And therefore, Toiv is Yetzah Toiv. You try to do as much as you can in these circumstances. But Toiv Ma'oid, when you're going for all or nothing, that's Yetzer Hara. Tafasta mu'it, tafasta merube, like tafasta. We say in davening every day, Shetargi leinu b'sorasecha, v'dabkeinu b'mitzvaysecha, v'al tevienu, v'lo l'dei chet, v'lo l'dei avera v'avim, v'lo l'dei nitzoyon, v'lo l'dei bizoyon, v'al yishloit bonu yetzer hara. V'archikeinu me'odam ra, u'michavar ra, v'dabkeinu b'yetzer ha-toiv, u'v'masim toivim. And then we add, v'choifes yitzreinu lehishtabed loch. So I ask, we already said that we should get rid of the Yetzer Hara. We should become attached to the Yetzer Toiv. So what are we adding now? V'choifes yitzreinu lehishtabed loch. But it could be, this is also al derech drush, kamovin, that we're saying that the Yetzer Toiv should be meshubah to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Sometimes the Yetzer Toiv is out of control. I mean, he wants Toiv Ma'oid. And when he wants Toiv Ma'oid, I mean, we becoming Gansam Meyuish. And therefore, after we said, V'dabkeinu b'Yetzer HaToiv, we say, V'choifetz Yisrael l'ishtabedlach, you should be koif our Yetzer Toiv to be meshubah to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and a knife of Batel, Ritzoincha, Mipnei Ritzoincha. So we don't really understand anything about Yaakov Avinu, but nevertheless, we're saying that this Bikei Shleishiv B'Shalva is equivalent in a sense to the idea of L'kshi Paneh. And the Batel Ritzoincha Mipnei Ritzoincha says that no, they don't want to be somewhere else, don't want to be in a different situation. Do what you can do in this situation. Now, you know, the Taz in his Akdama to Yeridea, so he says that Agav Urcha, by the way, he wants to be Male al Shulchan Melochim, a question that he was Niskasha Mikvar, B'divrei HaToysis B'Kiddushin Perek HaOmer. Because the Gemara in Kiddushin says that since we say that every T'nai has to be like the T'nai of Bnei Gad, Bnei Ruvain, therefore we have to have a T'nai Kofel. And therefore, the Gemara says, how is the T'nai of the Soita a T'nai Kofel? It says, Im Lo Shochav Ish Oisech Hinaki. The Gemara says that they didn't say a T'nai Kofel. And the T'nai Kofel was, Im Shochav Ish Oisech Chinki. She should be choked. V'im Lo Shochav Hinaki. The Torah only wrote half of the T'nai. But really, the T'nai was a T'nai Kofel. But asks Taisus, but the lashon of the Gemara is Im Lo Shochav Ish Oisech Hinaki. V'im Shochav Chinki. Asks Taisus that we have a klal that in Noim, since we learned it from Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, you have to have also hein koidem lalav. The positive has to come before the negative. No, so how do we say im loy shochav ish oisech hinaki v'im shochav chinki? We should say im shochav chinki v'im loy shochav hinaki, because the hein has to come before the lav. So Taisus says v'yashloimar the im loy shochav choshuv hein. Why? K'moy shanu roitzim shetase choshuv hein. Dum yedim tavru chalutzim shanu roitzim sheyavru v'im lo yavru yafsidu. Kachanu roitzim sheyiskayim im lo shochav v'zeu hein v'im shochav tafsid v'zeu lav. So Taisus says that hein and lav is not necessarily yes and no. Hein and lav is defined by what we want and what we don't want. So he says, just like we want the Tavru Chalutzim by the Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, and we don't want the Loi Tavru, so also what we want over here is the Loi Shochav Yishoisech. The Shochav Yishoisech is what we don't want. Therefore, by being Magdim, the Imloi Shochav Ish Oisech, we are being Magdim, the Hain, the positive to the negative, because the Loi Shochav is the positive. Says the Taz, V'yeshli al zeh Tema. Rabasi, because in Gittin, Perik Misha Ochzoi, the Gemara says that Shmuel was masakin in a get that a Shchivmara gives his wife. He doesn't want she should be Neufel Yibu, so he's afraid he's going to die, and he writes her a get. So Shmuel was masakin that he should write Im Loi Mati Lo Yehi Get. If I don't die, it shouldn't be a get. Ve'im Mati Yehi Get. If I do die, it should be a get. So the Gemara asks, well, let him say imati yehi get, v'im loy mati lo yehi get. Why do you should say first the positive, like the rule of hein koidim lalav? So the Gemara says loy makdim inish prunusa lanafshe. A person doesn't want to say first if I'll die. So therefore, Shmuel was masakin. He should say first im loy mati for frag the Gemara. But what happened to the klal that it has to be hein koidim lalav? So the Gemara says anachanami. You write three. You write im loy mati lo yehi get, im mati yehi get, v'im loy mati lo yehi get. So you satisfy all the needs. You satisfy the loy makdim inish pranusa lenafshe by having that first im loy mati, but then you have the hen kaidim lalav because you continue im mati yehi get, v'im loy mati lo yehi get. Azay zog the Gemara. Nu asks the Taz that according to Tosfos and Kedushin, that Masha Anu Roitzim is the Hain. So if he would say Im Loi Mati, Lo Yehi Get, that would be the Hain, because he doesn't want to die. So why do we have to have three sayings over here? We could have started with the Loi Mati. Why does the Gemara say that would be a problem of Lav Koidim Lehen? It's not, because that's the Anu Roitzim. So my father, Zechrani Lavracha, said, Vais Tois, that what you want doesn't really define what's positive and negative. What Tosfos said in Kiddushin, that K'moisha Onu Roitzim is the Hain, that's about what is objectively right, and what the Torah wants, and what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants, that Loi Shochav is Hain, and Shochav is Lav, but Loi Mati is not necessarily positive. Could be the positive thing is the mati, and so Mamela, it's not onu roitzim, me and you. I mean, this guy and his wife and his family and his friends. The onu roitzim means what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants, and therefore that doesn't define the hain. It doesn't define the lav as a hain. You know that there's a machlokes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva in the Mechilta in Parshas Yisro about what Yidden answered by Matan Torah. You know, the Rabbi Shmuel says that they answered on the hain, and on the lav. On the positive commandments, they said yes. And on the negative commandments, they said no. But Rabbi Akiva says they answered al lav, al hain, va'al lav hain. That even on the lav, they answered hain. What is this about? It could be that Rabbi Akiva is saying, that Yidden by Matan Torah reached the level where they only saw the positive and the negative, meaning even though it's loy sasa this, loy sasa that, but they saw that not as a barrier, they saw that not as something negative, but they saw that as an opportunity for advancement. They saw that as an opportunity for growth. They saw all those barriers as positive. They saw all those negative commandments as a positive opportunity, and therefore on the lav they also answered hein. And you know, the Gemara in Pesachim Daf Memtes says that Rabbi Akiva said that when I was in Amoritz, I used to say, "Mi yitem li talmid chacham ve'neschenu kechamor." Yeah, I'll bite him like a chamor. And this same Rabbi Akiva, you know, later on in the Gemara says in Bava Kama Daf Mem Aleph that Shimon HaMsuni, when Nehemiah HaMsuni, Hoyadorish Kol Esen Shebatoira, Ad She'igia Le'es Hashem Elokecha Tiro Pirish. We couldn't figure out how to darshan this S, which would Kaviyachol compare something to the Hashem Elokecha. Ad shebor Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva said that the S is l'Rabbi's Talmidei Chachamim. So you see that Rabbi Akiva, who was the one that used to say in his younger years, Mi yitein li Talmud Chacham ve'neschenu kechamor, he actually reached the highest level in his generation. He was the only one that was able to understand the value of a Talmud Chacham to the extent that he was able to darshan Es Hashem Elokecha Tiro l'Rabbi's Talmidei Chachamim. So Rabbi Akiva in his own personal life experienced how the negative can serve as a stepping stone for the positive. In other words, the lav, even that one already transgressed, can be transformed into positive energy. And therefore, alachas kama v'chama, the holding back from transgressing the lav, is a positive experience. And therefore, he says that Yidden by Matan Torah answered alav, hey. In the end of Masechtas Makkos, the Mishnah says, Kvar Hoyer Ram Gamliel, and Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, and Rebbe Yeshua, and Rebbe Akiva, Mahalchin Baderech, V'shomu Koil HaMoino Shel, Roimi, and the Mipatilus, Berochik Meya V'esrim Mil, V'schilu Boichin. So, Rebbe Akiva Masachik. So they said to him, what are you being Masachik? So he said to them, why are you crying? So they said, what do you mean we're crying? Avada, we're crying because Halolu goyim shemishtachavim la'atzovim umekatrim la'avodas kechavim yoshim betach v'hashkeit v'anachnu beis hadoim ragel elekenu sorav be'esh v'loy nifke. So he said, L'chein ani mesachik u'ma'im lo'oivre averekach nu lo'oiser ritzoyne alachas kama v'cham. So you see that the negative experiences that Rabbi Akiva experienced, what he took out of them is the positive. You see such great things happening to every Avera. No, Alachas kama v'chama lo'isei ritzoynoi. He b'chlal didn't focus on the negative. He only took out a positive lesson. That's the same Rabbi Akiva that says that Yidden by Matan Torah answered al lav hein. That's the same Rabbi Akiva that came from being an eschenu kechamor, came to the madrega of Es Hashem Elokecha Tiro l'Rabbi's Talmidei Chachamim. And this is the whole story of Rabbi Akiva. Yeah, it's pretty much comparable to Yaakov. They have even the same Oisius in their name because Rabbi Akiva's life. I mean, we know that he started learning. Rabbi Akiva is the one that says in Yevamos Daf Samach Beis that Baboikes Razeracho Ula Erev Al Tanachas Yodecha, and the Gemara says Rabbi Akiva. He had 12,000 zugei talmidim, and they all died. And then he was bought. So Rabbi Seinu Shebedoraim v'shana lahem v'heim hamidu Torah ba'isasho. Right. So I'm saying Rabbi Akiva, his baboiker was when most people are already in the erev mode. Yeah, Rabbi Akiva started learning at the age of 40, and that was his baboiker. No. And then, the Yerushalmi and Psachim that says that for 13 years he was learning by Rebbe Elazar and he didn't pay any attention to him until he asked one question. And that was his first question after 13 years that he actually was noticed in the Beis Medrash. So he didn't get a pat on the shoulder and he didn't get any encouragement. And he had to, rough it up and do it all on his own. At that late age, finally, he already became a Choshev, a Talmud of Rebbe Eliezer, a Talmud Muvik of Rebbe Elazar, like the Gemara describes in Sanhedrin. But, then his Rebbe was put in Cherem. His Rebbe was put in Cherem. Losing a Rebbe is a very, very difficult experience for a Talmud. The Rambam says that, that the Talmud Shegola Maglin Rabbi Imai, because it says, V'chai, that the Goyla deserves to live in the Ir Miklot, and Chachamim can't live without their Rebbe. Can't live. Rabbi Yochanan, he lost 10 children, and he not only was mechazik himself, but he used to be menachem other people. He used to carry around the bone of his 10th child and go to be menachem other people and tell them, Dain garma da asira beer. This is a bone of my 10th son. But the same Rabbi Yochanan, when he lost his beloved Talmud Rish Lakish, the Gemara says that Shav Daite, he totally lost it. I mean, his world came tumbling down. Ad the Shav Daite. And the Chachamim were bo rachami that he should die. And he did. So you see that the connection that the Rebbe has to the Talmud is greater than he had to all his 10 children. No, and for that Rabbi Akiva and Rebbe Lezer, what kind of connection they had, and nevertheless, so Rabbi Akiva, after he started learning at the age of 40, after he roughed it up in the Bismedrash, after he finally had a Rebbe, the Rebbe was taken away from him. He was put in Cherem. He couldn't talk to him anymore. And then he didn't give up, and he had those 24,000 Talmidim, and then he lost all those Talmidim, and then he went on, and he taught Torah to 5 Talmidim, Behein Hamidu Torah Shabbos Shah. So the pshat is that Rabbi Akiva had the ability to answer Hain to the Lav. Not only to the lav in Torah, but to the lav in life. I mean, all the negatives in life, you can take them in a negative way, or you can take them as a positive message that what's expected of you is more. And that's Rabbi Akiva's approach. You know, there's a very nice thing in the Tiferes Yisrael and the Boyaz, in the end of Masechtas Brachas, on the Mishnah that says, B'chol midah, u'midah shomoyed l'cha, b'chol mo'idecha, so he says, how a person can take control of his mazel. He says, instead of being like other people who are under the control of their mazel, you could become in control of your mazel. And he says, it's the midah that he's moided lecha, but that midah could be transformed into mo'idecha. He says it in German. He says die materielle Passivkeit umwandelt sich in eine religiös-moralische Aktivität in Selbstständigkeit. You become independent. Morally and religiously, and you transform the material passiveness into a religious moral activity. And that's transforming the B'chol Midah U'Midah Shu Moeded L'cha and making it into a Mo'oidecha. So the circumstances enable and Amachayev and Avodas Hashem in a way that is appropriate in those circumstances. In the Matzah of Loisipane, the avodah is to do what can be done in the loisipane. So that's the thing. So the Bikish Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva Kofetz Olav Rugzei Shel Yosef in Tzadikim Loidayin. The truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, we know that the Rugzei Shel Yosef really brought about a higher madrega. It was Yosef became the Shalat to Amashbir. The Yosef was the Lefleita Gedola. You know, so it wasn't really all negative about the Rugzei Shel Yosef. The Rugzei Shel Yosef was on a deeper level, was positive, and that really taught Yaakov to free himself of all notions and to free himself of defining reality in the way it seems, but to see it as what it is, which is what we don't understand. Okay, Rabbi Say, I wish you all a good Shabbos.